All right, so we can get started. Uh, I hope you guys are ready for the most exciting 40 minutes of your life because we are going to be talking all about utilities and utility rights here in New York State. We're going to be talking about how these rates are set. I'm going to be talking specifically about some updates with Con Edison since you're here because you heard about this through Senator Hoylman-Sigal's office. There's a good chance you live in Manhattan and your utility is Con Edison. We're going to be looking at a sample bill to try to highlight some of the important things that we think people should be aware of when they receive their bills each month. And we're also going to talk about things that you can do when you are falling behind on your utility bills and you're worried about potentially being shut off. There are things that you can do to prevent that. We're also going to be talking about the Department of Public Service and the Public Service Commission and how they play a role in all of this and your rights as they relate to complaints that you can file against a utility with the department. And at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about some legislative and budget updates as they relate to energy affordability here in New York. So let's just get started. So when we talk about utilities, since I do work at the Public Utility Law Project, what does that mean? You might know the big ones. The energy ones are electric and gas, you know, how you light up your home, how you heat your home. Beyond that, there's also water as a utility, telecom is a utility, your internet, your telephone, and your TV. Those are utilities as well. But today we're just obviously going to be focusing on Con Edison because you live in Manhattan. You receive both your electric and your natural gas from this one utility. As opposed to someone like me who lives in Brooklyn, Con Edison is my electric company, but National Grid is my gas company. So there's a lot of information on this slide here, but I just want to start by setting a broad picture. When you think about energy, when you think about a public utility, you can kind of separate it between supply and delivery. Supply is your power plant. It's the thing that makes, for example, the electricity. It, burns some sort of fuel, turns a generator that makes electricity. That's your supply. How it gets to your home is the delivery system. It's the big transmission wires. It's the substation where those big transmission wires get converted to smaller voltage distribution lines, and it's those distribution lines that connect from the substation to your home. In New York State, on each of your bills, you can see that your charges, your rates are separated between supply charges and delivery charges. When utilities were first starting to become a thing, these were all kind of considered one. The utility owned the power plant and it owned the delivery lines to get the electricity from the plant to your home. Starting in about the 90s, throughout the country, but also in New York specifically, we decided that this system wasn't the best way to set things up. It wasn't really working for customers. And so the decision was made that this monopoly, this vertical integration would be split apart. The utilities, like for example, Con Edison, would no longer own the power plants. They would have to be sold off to third parties. So instead of actually creating the electricity, Con Edison now purchases the electricity and they still own the delivery side. So when we're talking about rate cases, when we're talking about Con Edison raising your rates, we're talking specifically about the delivery rates. Supply now it's all deregulated. Con Edison just purchases it from third parties. They can only pass on the cost to you. They can't make a profit on supplying electricity to you. There's supposed to be a benefit there. It's generally supposed to lead to lower costs. But unfortunately, now that this is a market, markets can fluctuate. Markets can be impacted by price shocks, and not necessarily just what happens here in New York, but around the world. I think maybe we've all been familiar with what's happening in Ukraine. That's impacted natural gas prices, which in turn is impacting electric prices. That's having an impact on your ultimately on your monthly bills. Inflation is also having an impact on supply costs. So No system's perfect. This is the system we're working with right now. We do want to flag that there are now, thanks to deregulation in New York State, there are companies called ESCOs, energy supply companies. Con Edison is not the only company that can purchase electricity on the wholesale market. These ESCOs can also purchase electricity and they can sell it to you. We generally advise people to stay away from ESCOs. These are companies that will come to you and say, Con Edison is charging you, I don't know, for example, 50 cents per kilowatt hour. We'll charge you only 30 cents per kilowatt hour. You're going to save a bunch of money if you sign this 3-year contract with us. The problem is that that 30-cent per kilowatt hour is not fixed. And what we see happen most of the time when it comes to ESCOs is people think that they're locking in a very low price, but that price can change and almost always increases to the point where you end up paying more than you otherwise would have with Con Edison. So we generally don't trust ESCOs, and we advise customers to stay away. Saying a little bit more about delivery, like I said, when it comes to rate cases, these are the charges that are being increased or being asked to increase by the utility. This is the part of the system that's regulated. Now that we have that market and the supply side, we're keeping our hands off the market. We're not regulating it, but we do continue to regulate the delivery side. And with these, when it comes to these rate cases, they're essentially like accountings of costs. The utility is saying, this is how much money it's now costing us to maintain this delivery system. This is how much we're currently charging customers. It's not enough, so we have to raise our rates to meet that. They have to explain it, and there's usually some kind of back and forth between the department, the utility, groups like Pulp, and that amount almost always goes down from what they asked versus what they end up getting. I'll talk a little bit more about Con Ed's rate case later on here, but we can move on for now. Pulp is generally very concerned about rate increases in general because in New York State right now, there is a utility debt crisis. There's really no other way to put it. This is a very large graph, but what I want to bring your attention to, and I hope you guys can see my cursor here, this third column from the left, dollar sign, amount owed. If you go down to the bottom here, you see a figure, $1.5 billion, basically 1.6 billion. This is the total amount of money by which people are behind on their electric and gas bills in New York State as of February of this year. If you look over on the left here, this is 1.3 million accounts. That's 1.3 million households who currently owe money to their utility that's older than 60 days. So they're at least 2 months behind on their bill. 1.3 million families owing $1.6 billion to their utility companies. It's very clear that people cannot afford their bills as it is. And so we're always very skeptical about any time a company says that they need to raise their rates. The pandemic obviously made this a whole lot worse. New York State did implement a couple of rounds of utility debt relief that was very helpful in the short term for a lot of families, but it did not solve the long-term problem of people just being unable to afford their bills. And my cat, I just want to warn everyone that my cat has now jumped on my desk, and you may end up seeing her on screen at some point. So moving specifically to Con Edison now, as many of you are likely aware, your Con Edison bill has recently gone up. This process started over 2 years ago at this point. Con Edison first filed its proposal to increase its rates back in January of 2022. In that initial filing, they said that they needed $1.2 billion in additional revenues. That amounted to about 11.2%, an 11.2% increase. Con Edison is a very large company. It's the biggest utility in New York State. So $1.2 billion is obviously a lot of money. It ended up being much less than that when the Public Service Commission voted to approve the increase in July of 2023. But it was still quite a lot of money. And it was money that Con Edison now has the legal right to collect from customers over the next 3 years. And so each January, starting January 2024 of this year, and again in January 2025, customers are going to see increases on their bills. It's very hard to determine, like on an individual household, like how much a person is expected to pay, how much more a person is expected to pay thanks to these rate increases. So we usually default to like an average household. So an average household in New York uses about 600 kilowatt hours per month in electricity. And so that average household is going to experience an increase of $6 per month thanks to these rate hikes. That's $6 per month for 2024. That is going to increase again in 2025. Ultimately, this is going to be, when this is all said and done, customers are going to be paying on average $18 $18 more per month on their electricity bill. And since Con Ed is also a gas company, the average customer uses 100 therms per month in gas. That amounts to an increase of $13.50 per month. And again, that's over 3 years, $13.50 per month each year. By the end of this, that's $40.60 more per month for the average household. I mentioned before that they're asking for this money because their costs are increasing, the cost to maintain their system, or the cost to invest in upgrades to the system. And so Pulp, along with the group AARP, we filed a petition with the Public Service Commission urging the state to track the utilities' applications for federal funding, because ratepayers are not the only source of funding that utilities can take advantage of. As I'm sure many of you know, over the past few years, the federal government passed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, EJA. It's also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And they also passed the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. That both of those acts included billions of dollars for utility investments. And we believe that New York State, as well as all the utilities, need to do their best to take advantage of this unique funding opportunity, because each dollar more in federal funding that they receive is a dollar less that they need to take from ratepayers. So we want to ensure that the companies are taking advantage of this to the greatest extent possible. And one other thing that's important to flag for Con Edison customers, and you may have already noticed this because it happened about 5 months ago now. In October 2023, Con Ed made a major upgrade to its customer service system. And a lot of this happened like on the back end for customer service representatives. They're using like a whole new system. But what it means for customers is you all now have a new account number. Your account number changed in October. All of the information is supposed to stay the same. The information, your past billing history, all that stuff is the same. The only thing that should have changed is your account number. We have noticed a few, we'll call them hiccups in this process. Con Ed is a very large company. This is a very big change. There was bound to be some hiccups involved. People receiving strange bills, information missing on their bills. And we've been in contact with Con Edison, alerting them to these issues. They're aware of them. I believe they're working pretty hard to fix it. And by now it's been several months. We haven't seen as many issues. So ultimately, we think this has been a pretty good transition. This is it's like obvious news to me since I work in this industry, but I don't know if any of you on this call are familiar with the utility Central Hudson, which represents provides electric and gas for customers in the Hudson Valley. They also upgraded their customer service system a few years ago, and it was a very big disaster, I'll say, for which the Public Service Commission is still investigating them. This upgrade so far does not seem to be like that, not nearly as bad. So now we can start talking about what actually appears on your bill. And when you're looking at a bill, these are the things that we at Pulp think you should try to focus on, important aspects of your monthly bill. Just want to flag that this is not a real person. I'm not doxing anyone. This is a sample bill. This person does not exist. So One issue that has been brought up to Pulp recently is a question of like, what does it mean for a bill to be monthly? We all think about, we get our Con Edison bill every month, but say, for example, you get your February bill at the beginning of March. Maybe you get it like on March 6th. But then in April, you don't get your bill until maybe April 10th. And then you look and you see that my electricity charges were for 34 days. My gas charges, I'm being charged for 34 days. There aren't 34 days in a month. What's going on? Am I being overcharged? So Pulp has actually looked into this because we didn't have a specific answer for this at first, but it turns out there is no statutory requirement for how these utilities measure each billing cycle. So it could be uh, as small of a cycle as like 25 days, or as large of a cycle as like 35 days. It tends to fluctuate around 30, which makes sense. It's around 30 days for each month. But what's important to note is that the utilities are not supposed to charge you like the no day is supposed to overlap. And in the long run, this all tends to work out because you know as long as the days aren't overlapping, it doesn't really matter how long each individual chunk of time is. So, you could get a bill for 34 days, the next bill could be 30. It's frustrating, especially when if, for example, you're a low income customer and you're trying to budget your expenses down to the dollar. It can be very tough to, have a bill that for whatever reason is 4 extra days than it was last month. Unfortunately, there is nothing really to do about that. The utility is allowed to fluctuate a bit, so long as they're not, like I said, double charging. Um, so I talked a bit already about, Con Edison's new customer service, the transfer in that. There have been some hiccups in there. When it comes to bills and bill legibility, Con Edison is actually one of the better utility companies in New York State. We like the way that Con Edison displays information on their bill. And by way of example, um, Con Edison on each bill has this section at the bottom of the first page. So it's just messages for you. If there is something important that Con Edison wants to bring to your attention regarding that month's bill, they will usually have something in this section with these little megaphones. For this customer, they're just advising, you could go paperless, save some paper. You can do that here. Join our direct payment plan if you'd like to do that. But for example, sometimes, if you're a HEAP recipient, I'll talk about HEAP later on if you don't know what that is, you'll get a grant 1 month during the heating season of several $100s. Con Edison will alert you to that fact here in this section. They say, this month we received a HEAP payment for X amount of dollars. It's been applied to your account. You can see it under adjustments, on this page. So we like this. And we encourage customers when they receive a bill, just, scan it. If there's anything new under the messages section, it's worth paying attention to. Now, the second page of each bill is where it really gets down into the nitty gritty. One thing that we flag for customers recently, I think within the past few years, Con Edison went through a process where they installed what are called AMI meters, advanced meter infrastructure, I think is what it stands for. Um, Basically, this system is replacing the old meter reader system where a person would actually physically visit your home or the apartment building, like in the basement where all the meters are, and they would literally go and read the meter. Uh, Now we're at a point, I think Con Edison is almost, if not completely finished, installing AMI meters throughout the system. Um, these are just wireless communication devices. So instead of having someone go out and read it, the meter just automatically sends updates to Con Edison, um, alerting them to how much energy is actually being used. And so how that gets translated on your bill is under reading type. And I'm going to zoom in here a bit. Um, you can see here, this says reading type actual. That means either, at least in Con Edison's case, since these are all AMI meters, the meter is working correctly and it's sending actual information to Con Edison. Before the AMI meters were installed and it said actual, that would mean that a person actually did come out and read it. It can also say estimated. Now you're a Con Edison customer. If you know you have an AMI meter and you look at your bill and it says estimated, that's a sign that something's up with your meter. If they're estimating your reading, that means that they weren't able to get a proper reading. And so something's going on there with your AMI meter. It might be worth reaching out to Con Edison at that point to see if, why are you estimating my bills? Is my meter broken? It's a sign that you might need to reach out to the company. I also skipped this section here, but as I was saying, your bill is broken up between supply and delivery. It's physically broken up here between supply and delivery. On the left side of your bill is always the supply charges. On the right side is always the delivery charges. Like I said, the supply cost is just how much the company paid, how much the utility paid for electricity for that month, broken down by how much you actually used. That cost just gets passed on to you. Whatever the company paid is what you pay. The delivery side is where they can actually make a profit. And so where it says, delivery 273 kilowatt hours at 12.5604 cents per kilowatt hour. There's a buffer there between how much it actually costs them to transfer the money and how much they charged you. They're making a little extra there, which is their statutory right as a private monopoly in operating in New York State. And the same, as you can see, it gets broken down by electricity on top, gas on the bottom. The same information is available on the bottom for gas. A lot of animations here on the slides. So that was the bill reading section. And now we get to sort of the day-to-day work that Pulp does with low-income customers who might be at risk of shutoff. When we work with someone, we try to go through this checklist with them just to see if there's anything that they can do for themselves to ensure that they don't get shut off. Our first piece of advice for anyone who is maybe falling behind on their bills, they're worried they're at risk of shut off, is to just pay what you can when you can. If you can't afford your full bill, that's just the reality that you're living with. You can't afford your full bill. That said, if you can afford even like $10 per month, the day that it's due, we would advise you to pay something. That's generally a signal to, for example, Con Edison, that you are aware that you have a bill and, for whatever reason, you just can't afford it, but you are trying. That does, in fact, go a long way towards preventing shutoff if the company knows that you are trying. Beyond that, you may get a bill one month that says, final notice, you are at risk of termination, please pay X amount of money by X date. If you get one of those bills and oh, I can't afford this is too much to ask for all at once, you can call the utility. You can call Con Edison and ask the customer service rep, is there a termination scheduled for my account? If so, when is it? If there is, if you ask that question, it turns out, yes, we do have a shut-off scheduled for 2 weeks from now. You do have the right to say, can you just give me an extra 30 days? I just need some time to come up with the money. They usually can do that. And they're generally, if you made the effort to call them and ask for this 30-day hold, they're generally going to grant it, at least once. Perhaps not every time, but at least once. Beyond this work, we also try to connect customers with financial assistance. Pulp, unfortunately, we don't have the capability to provide financial assistance to customers. We just provide legal advice, but we can, advocate on your behalf and try to connect you with existing financial assistance. That would generally be through HRA, which is New York's Department of Social Services. Um, and you can get connected to cash assistance that you might have been eligible for that you didn't know about. SNAP, Medicaid, these are all ways to save money elsewhere so you can have a little extra money to pay for your bills. Um, if you are eligible for things like SNAP or Medicaid, uh, that also means you're eligible for Con Edison's Energy Affordability Program. This is a monthly discount. It provides anywhere from 10 to $50 off of your bill each month, depending on what tier you're in, what kind of low income you are. Um, but that can be a very helpful program for people to save a little bit of money each month on their bills. Um, there are also ways to prevent shutoff that are unrelated to finances, but for example, if someone in your household, you or someone else, has a serious medical condition or is using life-sustaining equipment that needs to be plugged in and powered in order to work, there are certain times a year, like during the heating season, where the company will not shut you off if someone in your household has one of these codes on the account. And it's also going to be important if, for example, someone is like has a dialysis machine, for example, that needs to be plugged in. Uh, Even if you aren't worried about being shut off, it's important to let the company know that because in the case of a blackout, they need to triage where to, send resources first or which neighborhoods or blocks to try to reconnect fastest. It's good for them to know where these people live because those people are going to get priority when it comes time to turn the power back on. So I always advise people to, let the company know if you do have something like this in your household. Um, at the end of all of this, if we checked off all of this stuff, um, and for whatever reason there's still some arrears, some money owed to the company, you can enroll in what's called a deferred payment agreement. I believe we're going to get to that a little bit later in the presentation here, but essentially a deferred payment agreement is an agreement between you and the company where you say, I agree to pay back however X amount of money I owe, a little bit each month on top of my regular bill. Entering into one of these agreements stops the shutoff process. Once you sign that and it gets accepted by the company, you're not considered at risk for shutoff anymore, so long as you stay on top of the agreement, as long as you stay current on your bills. And then we have to remember that Con Edison is not the top of this food chain here. They are regulated. They're regulated by the State Department of Public Service. If you're having an issue with the utility, you have the right to file a complaint with the department, and they'll investigate Con Edison, make sure that they're doing everything the way they're supposed to be doing, and if not, try to remedy the situation. So speaking of financial assistance, there are a few grants available for customers who are having issues paying for their bills. The biggest one is HEAP, the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. I mentioned that a few slides ago. This is a federal program. The federal government distributes block grants to each state for the state to use to send grants to customers who can't afford their heating bills during the winter. Unfortunately, HEAP is not available for the rest of the year. The heating season, as it's called, closed last Friday, in fact. However, there is something called emergency HEAP that is still open. There are still grants available for customers who are facing shutoff to help pay for their heating bills. So if you think you might need some of this, I would advise contacting HRA to see if you're eligible. These are the eligibility guidelines that you can see here. If you make less than these incomes listed on the right and your household size matches what's on the left, you qualify for HEAP. Besides the heating assistance, HEAP also has what's called cooling assistance. That's going to open on May 1st. This is a small grant for customers to purchase air conditioning for their home. It makes the one-time cost of air conditioning more affordable, but of course, Air conditioning is pretty energy intensive. It's not going to help you month to month to pay down the cost of running the AC, but it will help you purchase one if you need to. HRA also has a very useful program called Emergency Energy Assistance. These are also what's known as one-shot deals. If you are, low income, at risk of shutoff, you can go to HRA to ask for this one-shot deal. And it's basically a grant from HRA directly to Con Edison to pay down what you owe. There is a limit to how much is available, like per grant, and they're called one shots because you generally will only get one. But there are also groups like Catholic Charities, for example, non-governmental grants that you can seek out, and they will, small, maybe up to $200, depending on your situation, where the organization will just pay part of your bill on your behalf. So I mentioned EAP, the Low Income Energy Affordability Program. How do you determine if you're eligible? I mentioned there are a few public benefits that you can receive. If you receive one of them, you're automatically eligible. What's nice about New York City is if you already receive one of these things from HRA, SNAP, SSI, TANF, or Medicaid, HRA every quarter, they do this 4 times a year, will just send your information to Con Edison just to ensure that, if you're not already in EAP, they have your information now, they'll just automatically enroll you. So you might be enrolled and you don't even know it. You could see it if you look at your bill. There will be an adjustment. I'm not going to go all the way back, but on the first page, there will be an adjustment. It'll be like negative $10 on your bill, for example. That's generally a sign that you are enrolled in EAP. If you don't see one of those adjustments, it's likely that you're not enrolled. If you do want to enroll in EAP, if you're not already enrolled and you don't want to wait for the end of the quarter for HRA to reach out to Con Edison on your behalf, you can fill out a form. And as far as annoying government forms go, this one's pretty straightforward. It's just one page. You put your name, mailing address, your apartment, etc. You check off which program you're enrolled in. And if it's SNAP, for example, HRA will send you what's called an award letter or a budget letter when they first decide that you're eligible for this. You just take a copy of that award letter, scan it, or print it out, what have you, attach it to this form, and mail it to Con Ed. And yeah, you'll be enrolled. One thing I do want to flag, on the top right, the top line of this form, it says benefit qualifying person if different than customer. If you yourself are not enrolled in any one of these programs, but someone living with you is, for example, if you have a grandparent or child or a grandchild who receives a benefit of this kind, your household qualifies based on their receipt of this program. So instead of your name, you just put their name and attach their award letter to this application, and you should be good to go. I did talk about deferred payment agreements already. This basically is repeating what I already said, but I do want to flag some things that are listed here. When in the process of filling out the deferred payment agreement, the company Con Edison may require you to make a down payment if your arrears, the amount you owe, is significantly high. That said, each DPA has to be tailored to your financial circumstances. And by law in New York State, under the Home Energy Fair Practices Act, the lowest DPA that a customer can be eligible for is one in which you pay no down payment and you only agree to pay $10 per month on top of your current bill. There is no interest on these, so you're not paying more just because you're paying less each month. Zero interest agreement. You just keep paying $10 each month until that balance is gone and you're no longer at risk of shutoff. And that said, maybe you just don't want to have this debt hanging over your head. So you agree to something like $80 a month on top of your regular bill because, you just got a new job. You weren't working for a few months, so the bills piled up. But, now you have a steady income. You can start making some pretty big payments on this to pay it down. But let's say you were working 40 hours at this new job and then your hours got cut. And you're down to like 25 or 30. What was a reasonable $80 a month is now too much. A DPA is not set in stone. They can be changed if your financial circumstances change. You just have to provide proof. Here's a pay stub from when I was working 40 hours. Here's my latest pay stub. I'm only working 25. Can we change this DPA so I only pay $20 a month or 10, for example? That's supposed to be allowed. That said, maybe Con Edison just doesn't feel like being a good negotiating partner. That's when you bring in the department. You can always call the Department of Public Service. They have a hotline. They have an online complaint form if you'd rather do that. And you can explain that you're trying to negotiate this DPA and the company just is not working with you. That's the perfect time to bring in DPS. They can require the company to start engaging in good faith. So the order in which I've explained these last few slides is basically the order in which we follow when we're working with a customer one-on-one. We try to connect them with services. We try to get some financial assistance if we can to pay down the amount they owe. If they still owe some money, we'll try to get them into a deferred payment agreement to, eliminate the risk of shutoff. And then we can start thinking about some longer term solutions. Here in New York City, it's a bit different because most of us rent. So, we don't own a home. And any, sort of long-term energy efficiency programs, we'd have to get the landlord involved, which can be, it can be a whole thing, but it is still possible. So I do want to flag some of this stuff. NYSERDA is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. They manage many or not most or not maybe all of the energy efficiency programs that are available throughout the state. You can visit their website, energyadvisor.newyork.gov, to learn more about the many programs that they offer, including Solar for All and Empower. I want to talk a bit more about Empower, specifically Empower Plus is a program in New York State operated by NYSERDA in which low-income utility customers, or just low-income households in general, can get free energy audits and may also qualify for free services, including weatherization, replacement of single pane drafty windows, in some cases replacement of inefficient appliances, an old refrigerator, an old stove. Through Empower Plus, you may be able to get a free new refrigerator or a free new stove. It's a very, it has the potential to be a very useful program for households that qualify. Beyond that, you have the various other programs like Community Solar, where you can get a partial credit on each monthly bill if you agree to receive your power through a community solar program. Those aren't available everywhere in New York. I think they're less prevalent here in the city than they are, for example, upstate or on Long Island. But you might be able to qualify. Like I mentioned, there's the free home energy assessment through the Residential Energy Audit Program. That's also through Empower Plus. And they have the Weatherization Assistance Program, which does many of the things I've already talked about through Empower Plus. Ways in which you can reduce your heating and cooling costs by weatherizing your home, improving the insulation, switching from single pane to double pane windows, etc. So I mentioned before in the example of the deferred payment agreement where the company just isn't working with you. That's when you want to bring in the department. The way you're supposed to do it is you're supposed to try to work this out with the utility. For example, negotiating for this DPA. But if that's just not working, they're not being a good faith negotiator, that's when you want to escalate. You can do that by filing what's called an inquiry, uh, or you could file a complaint. An inquiry is basically like, hey, Department of Public Service, I'm not sure what's happening here. I don't know if something is wrong, but it doesn't feel like things are, on the level. Please look into this for me. And then you explain your situation. A complaint is when you know something's up and you just want to skip the inquiry process and go straight to a complaint. You have the right to do that. Either way, if it's an inquiry, if it's a complaint, you call the DPS hotline at this number here, or you can file online at this address. I believe these slides are going to be made available to anyone who wants to see them. So you should be able to follow the link. And each time you make an inquiry or a complaint, you're going to be given a confirmation number. Make sure you record that, because if you ever want to follow up on this, you're going to need to have a confirmation number. And so last slide. We are very close to a budget here in New York State. I think if this webinar were held, maybe even tomorrow, I might have some more concrete things to share with you guys. That's how close we are. But there are a few energy affordability aspects to the budget process and to just general New York State legislation in general that I think would be good to bring to everyone's attention. HEAP, every year, the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, OTDA, OTDA, has to create a New York State HEAP plan that the public can comment on. That comment period is open right now, and PULP is participating in that comment period. There are ways we think that HEAP could be improved, be made more accessible to people, and so we're in that process right now. The EAP program, which is currently not a law, strangely enough. It's a policy or a program set up through the Public Service Commission here in New York State. Its purpose is to ensure that, or goal, is that no household should pay more than 6% of their annual income on their utilities bills. The EAP program is supposed to be designed to make that that goal a reality, at least for low-income households. There are various proposals right now being negotiated right now in the New York State budget that could potentially make the EAP program a law and potentially provide more funding to it. The same goes for Empower Plus, the weather assistance program, and Solar for All. These are programs that exist right now that could receive more funding in the budget. And recently, during the last legislative session, New York passed a bill for utility data matching. That's the process that I explained that happens right now between HRA and the utility, where instead of having to apply yourself, HRA will just send that information to the utility and you automatically be enrolled in your utility's EAP program. This bill expands that process beyond New York City for the whole state. We think it's going to be a great way for customers throughout New York to receive the benefits that they should be already receiving. For whatever reason, they just haven't been enrolled in the program yet. Like I said, EAP is specifically for low-income people. There are proposals to expand EAP. It's called the Expanded EAP program to hopefully encompass moderate-income households as well. Because ultimately, the goal is that nobody should pay more than 6%, not just low-income people. Also, along the same lines, there's the Empower Plus guarantee. It is another avenue through which New York is trying to achieve this 6% energy goal. If you go through the Empower Plus program, if you are a home that, for example, heats currently with gas or maybe with fuel oil that gets delivered, and you go through this electrification process, New York State will guarantee on your behalf that your bills will not exceed 6% of your income, which is very helpful. And then there's a statewide Solar for All program trying to increase access to solar energy for customers, which should be ultimately cheaper in the long run. And gosh, just like that, can you believe it? We made it to the end. Thank you guys.
So yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much. So unfortunately, it's not the end just yet. For better or for worse, we have a few questions. If you're willing to take them, Andrew.
Totally.
Um,
I'm gonna
and
stop
so
sharing right now just so I can see
yeah,
everybody.
so folks who are watching, you're welcome to continue to put questions in. I think the way that we're going to do this is I'm just going to read them. If you feel like I misinterpret your question, you're welcome to put more information in the chat. So um, the first question was, my provider is my own building. What are my rights? Um, she does the billing through the building.
Yeah, so I believe, and I could be wrong, but that the situation you're describing does sound like what's called submetering, where um, for many people, say you live in an apartment building, I'm going to use my building as an example. Um, I have a Con Edison account and a National Grid account. I have meters for Con Edison and for National Grid. If I wanted to go down to the basement right now, there'd be like 8 meters for electricity, another 8 for natural gas. Those are for each unit in my building. Everyone has their own account, and everyone has their own relationship with Con Edison and with National Grid. For submetered buildings, if you were to go into the basement, for example, there might only be 1 meter. That meter is for the whole building. And instead of each person having their own meter, their own Con Edison account, you're what's called submetered. So you have these little submeter, similar to the new AMI meters that just have like electronic communication between the meter and Con Edison. These little submeters can measure how much energy each unit is using. Um, and so rather than having the relationship that most people have with the utility, what it sounds like this questioner has is a relationship with their building. The building pays uh, the overall bill for every unit in the building and then charges that amount to each individual unit. Um, there are issues with this setup, for especially for example, low income customers. Um, if you don't have an account with Con Edison, you can't enroll in the EAP program because you don't have an account. It's your building owner that has the account. If that's the case for you, there are solutions to this problem. You're supposed to be able to petition your building owner to provide you with rates consistent with a similarly situated customer. I believe that's the language, the legal language there. Um, so essentially, I think for most people, your rights are the same. It's just that for sub-metered buildings like this, there are additional hoops, unfortunately, that you have to go through.
Yeah, that was a great answer. And I think if we didn't have a few more questions, I'm sure we could dive even deeper.
Yeah.
Um, Someone else asked, in their house upstate, which is serviced by National Grid, a power surge damaged some appliances. Uh, what are this person's rights? If we're treating this as like a more abstract situation, not necessarily as like um, legal advice to this person, but
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. That's a great question. There are, I think, generally issues in determining where a utility provider's responsibilities start and where they end. Um, I think from the utilities perspective, um, they're going to say, "Hey, we have nothing to do with this. This is a power surge," but it seems like uh, they might argue um, this is an issue with your circuit breaker, for example, or this is an issue with something in your home that National Grid does not control. Um, that's not to say you don't have rights or that you shouldn't, try to seek some sort of remedy. And I think it's difficult for me to say exactly like, what steps someone should take in this situation. Um, but I would encourage you, I think, to reach out to Pulp. Our mission is to advocate on behalf of low income customers, but if anyone comes to us with a question about the utility, we don't turn anyone away. Like we try to answer as many questions as we can. So If you do want to get some more in-depth information, I think we'd be happy to, provide you with some more one-on-one, assistance. If you want to email us at info@utilityproject.org.
Awesome. Yeah, great. Glad to hear. Oh, and
Yes, Lori Wheelock
Lori,
is
yeah,
the executive director of Pulp. She's in the chat, hopefully providing more detailed responses than I can.
awesome. Okay. Someone else asked. Uh, this is an interesting one. So my landlord is trying to take away the utility allowance that is part of my lease. What can I do?
That is an interesting question. The landlord is trying to take away the
Yeah.
utility
So
allowance.
uh, Lori Wheelock said DHCR has a complaint form. So yeah, I mean, if you're a rent stabilized customer, obviously you're entitled to a renewal lease on the same conditions as your original lease. Is that what did Lori win? Is this oh, the national service? Okay, yeah. So the DHR complaint form is like for reduction. That might you could file a reduction of services complaint. I don't know, Andrew, have you ever encountered anything like this about utility allowances in leases?
Yeah, we're getting more and more issues coming to us regarding landlord-tenant relationships and how utilities intersect with that. I don't specialize, unfortunately, in housing law, and there are times when I think it might be more beneficial to reach out to a housing attorney, but I think the information that Lori provided could potentially help out.
Amazing. Okay. And someone said, I don't understand this question, but maybe you're the expert, so maybe you do. This person said, "What is time of use rate?"
Time of use rates, yeah. So we didn't get a chance to get into different rate structures or different rate designs, but essentially, time of use rates are a reflection of how much it costs the utility at different times of the day to provide power to people. Um, it might be useful to think about this in terms of like pre and post pandemic. Um, Pre-pandemic, most people were waking up around the same time during the weekdays. Everyone is turning on the coffee maker, turning on the microwave, opening and closing the refrigerator in the hours between like 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. That provides a pretty big strain on the grid, the utility grid, the power system, and the distribution system. So the costs increase at that time. Um, then during the workday, like the load increases in Midtown because a bunch of people are in the offices. That increases the cost of service to that area. Time of use rates are sort of a reflection of how much it costs at different times of day to provide power. And the idea is to encourage off-peak use. So instead of like the demand curve going like this, it tries to like flatten it to go like this. It's supposed to encourage people by way of making it cheaper to use electricity at certain times a day, or making it much more expensive to use at different times a day to try to change the demand curve or change customer behavior. So yeah, there are a bunch of different ways that companies or utility companies can structure their rates to change customer behavior. Time of use rates are one way to do that.
So I think those were all the questions that we had. I guess sorry, like a last thing. So the person who asked about maybe worried that her building is overcharging her. Like so if someone thinks their building is overcharging them, they have a sub-metered setup that you described. If they'd like to investigate those charges, are there any steps that you'd recommend they take?
Yeah, I think it sort of mirrors the advice we had for just regular customer complaints. Just substitute the building management in place of the utility. So make an effort to try to reach out to the building management to see if they can't, like, maybe there is something wrong with the sub meter and like they're measuring the electricity wrong. You might encourage them to like check that in some way. Um, if they are just not being helpful, or if they reach a conclusion that you don't think is correct, then you can reach out to the department. Even though they're not a utility, um, the Department of Public Service does still regulate sub-metered buildings, just in a different way. But you do still have the right to complain to DPS about this.
Okay, so it sounds like this person might need some more assistance, so that you're welcome to reach out to us or reach out to Pulp. And yeah, I think same goes for everyone. Any questions, you can reach out to us. You can reach out to Pulp. We can relay any concerns or questions to Pulp, vice versa. But I think I want to conclude and let you get back to your cat, Andrew. So um, thank you so much, Andrew and Lori and all of Pulp for helping to arrange this. I learned a lot. Other people said in the chat this was helpful, so hopefully that confirms that other people learned a lot. And yeah, thank you so much. I'm gonna any closing words before I end the webinar?
No, just thank you everyone for coming out. I love talking about this stuff, so anytime I get a crowd to do it in front of, like, I'm happy. So thank you all for showing up. I'm glad this was helpful for some people. And yeah, if you do have any issues, definitely reach out to us. We love helping people when it comes to the utilities.
Great. So I will share the slides and the recording with everyone. So thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Have a good night. Thank you.